This is Pat O'Connor, and the topic for this video is what should you do if you inherit a home with an over 65 tax exemption in place? Well, first of all, if you inherit the home and it was your spouse that passed, you don't need to do anything. The over 65 exemption for the remaining spouse, the exemption stays in place if you're 55 or older. So you don't even have to be 65 to take over an over 65 exemption from your spouse. But if you're 55 or older and your spouse passes, you can just leave the over 65 exemption in place. But for the sake of this video, let's say it was a parent who died and you are inheriting the house. If a deed is filed, the appraisal district will very likely cancel the over 65 homestead exemption. You might think, well, that's a bad thing because it really reduces your property taxes. But if your parent died intestate without a will and no deed is filed, the appraisal district will likely not remove the over 65 homestead exemption. And even if you are over 65, you would need to cancel the existing over 65 exemption and refile your own because the ISD school taxes will need to be reset at the current value instead of at the value that they were frozen at for your parents. So what is the consequence of just leaving the over 65 exemption in place? It's not pretty. I'll tell you, I've seen this situation a number of times, and usually someone is calling and the tax entities are looking for additional taxes going back 5, 10, 15 years. And what happens is if you leave the over 65 exemption in place, when they realize it, they will send out new tax bills as though there were no homestead exemption. So if you're under 65, you can at least qualify for the homestead exemption. But if 10 years have gone by, you can only get the homestead exemption going back 2 years plus the current year. So if it's 10 years, you are looking at a huge property tax bill. And many times people are just not able to pay it, and there is no avenue of protest. If the over 65 homestead exemption was left in place in error, there's no criminal penalties, but when you receive the tax bill for the additional taxes due because the over 65 exemption was not valid, they can be a massive amount of taxes. And I've seen people tremendously burdened by this, both emotionally and financially. So I would encourage you, if you inherit a house that has an over 65 exemption in place, cancel the existing over 65 exemption and apply for your own homestead exemption. Thanks for watching.